Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our second lecture and for joining this live lecture, and also good day to those that will be watching the recordings later or just listening to them. Now, sharp 12:15, and hope you had a good start of the week. And I think we have a second exciting lecture, still what I will call Introduction 2.0, and I'm very happy to see you all here. Less participants than last week, but this always happen as far as we evolve in the schedule. So okay, let's start our second lecture, and so the recording is already ongoing, and then you know where to consult it later on. So and today we'll be devoting time to understanding a little bit what it entails to discuss regional geography in the southern part of Europe. I will bring some examples, mainly through maps, so bringing really certain social issues, what we can also address or call them grand societal challenges, economic indicators, demographic indicators into a geographical perspective. And we'll do a cross-case analysis to really enhance this dimension of doing a regional geography study. And the lecture, and as well as the module, the lack or pays the price of a lack of up-to-date data on these grand societal channels involving the southern part of Europe, this region as we define it last week, in particular for the countries, the 4 countries I will be devoting more attention here. Only one heads up before the core of the lecture. I will then bring a couple of slides that I was not able to explain before, but I think this entry here on the information part or on our shared group clearly mirrors what we agreed last week on in terms of the examination. Here are all the details, but if you have questions at this moment, you can write on the chat, or can come to the lecture via voice if you want. And I try to really make it the things as clear as possible. So a caveat here for the day of the examination. It came to my knowledge that there are some clashes on the 23rd of February next year. So I reached out to the student coordinator to propose a different date, a date with fewer clashes with other modules as possible. And but I'm still waiting for that feedback. So the moment I have it, I will post it right away on this group. So if you have questions at this stage, or if you want to wait for the break to bring the questions, you are always free to interrupt me regarding this or any other question. So you also have an example of a very not so developed proposal by myself, where I use this style of embedding the references within the text without the need to bring the list of references. Why I'm doing this, because you are a large group of students, and instead of me having access to I will give you the voice right away. Instead of me having to go through 2 pages or two pages per student, then I will be reading 1 page per student. This benefits us all, because then that will certainly be faster. And Tim, would you like to make a question?
Yes, I have a question about the classic exam. So is it online, right? And we have to write the answers. How long are the answers, maybe? Because I'm not so fast in writing, and I know I always want to write a lot, but then maybe the time is up and stuff.
I think time will not be a problem, because that's a thing I can control. And when we can control the things, even in daily life, we are always open. So there's some flexibility. I'm not strict on that domain. I'm asking 800 words maximum, and this will be online. So we'll be writing digitally and in German or in English. This is up to you. And I'm asking 800 words with some flexibility here, 1.5 space, and 800 words per response, and that just to have more or less an organized structure here. I will provide 5 questions, and then you can choose to respond to 3 of them, and these 3 are those that count for the assessment. Is that clear? This is not written here, it's written in the other post where I write the 800 words for these 3 questions. I mean, 800 per response. The mini essay, 1000 words maximum, or ideal 1000 words for this take home mini essay. Is that clear?
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay. So then we can let's carry on with where we stopped last week. Let me try to recap a little bit that we assess this evolution of the regional geography, some of the pioneers of it, many of them human geographers, conducting different type of regional geography studies, some of them more on environmental aspects, biodiversity hotspots such as Humboldt, Vidal de la Blache in France, more on the lifestyles and the close to rural regional geography of France. And of course, as in all other disciplines, those you have been studying for the past years, there is always an evolution. There is always the need to develop new theoretical ways of thinking. And what are the key dimensions of this evolution of what we call now regional geography, which I don't really sympathize with the term. I will just simply call regional geography, because when we are doing a study unless you are within a history course, we of course are called to address specific issues at our time. So the new regional geography is simply the regional geography of our current state. But there are some caveats here to pay specifically specifically attention to them, or it's important to pay some specific attention to that. And but this new regional geography, as comes in the literature, evolved primarily since the 80s. And the idea is that this idea of having a well-defined boundary territory start to play or be developed together with an idea of a more abstract territory that we can also call regions, without having a very well-defined physical boundary, as was more common in the before this period of time. And what plays here the fundamental role is that was an understanding that what defined this territory, the steps that are fundamental in building a region, in regional building processes, are the social practices, the way people interact within that specific territory, being it well defined or loosely defined. So it's about the all these social components, social/cultural components, that start playing a fundamental role in a new understanding of regions and of original geography. I think later on this probably will become clear, and that's what I want you to take out today from the lecture, is this evolution from a more well-defined conceptualization of region to a more loosely defined, yet with some feelings attached to it, some social dimension that makes it somehow a robust territory, even in an abstract dimension. So these new regional geographers in general, they have been interested in also in the power relations that entail these practices of regional building, and all these power relations are fundamental in defining territories at current times. There are institutions playing a fundamental role in this context, a number of practices, norms, and also discourses that make people and communities to produce and reproduce these regions. So all of these daily life interactions and how institutions behave also in this context are fundamental, or start being more deeply explored within regional geography, or within the science of regional geography, mostly in terms of academic terms. So doing regional geography again, and we'll see later on also with the examples, that involves politics, it involves governance, formal and informal, it involves an understanding of economic dimensions of the geography as well, the economic activities, economic processes, education, media, and communication. They are also fundamentally in this process of region making, because they can convey one type of discourse that can lead, for example, to feelings of regional identity, and eventually even lead to the rise of populism that or nationalism, for example, that can foster or boost processes of a new regionalism. So with the idea of creating or bringing in more autonomy to a specific, in this case, well-defined territory. And what I find, the things I like the most within regional geography is the connections between, you probably already grasped that from my words, is the relationships between regions, within countries, across countries, even within the same region, the relationships that exist or coexist with other sub-regions. So this this became, after the 80s, a fundamental piece in the science of regional geography, understanding all these social processes, economical activities, the evolution of trade, for example, the development of transportation across spatial scales, involving again different regions within different territories, with different countries, well defined, and also within the same country. And a number of studies start to emerge in this understanding. As you may also come to understand this as you start also bringing your background to the context, the moment we start exploring these relationship across scales, being them social, economic, or even involving environmental conservation, for example, then we reach a different level of complexity, different institutions, different ways of interpreting democracy as well. So there are a number of power relations that are embed interests also that can then sometimes create movements of contestation, for example. So as you may understand, the moment we start evolving the analysis, we start facing more complexity. And if we put this in the context of the grand societal challenges we have today, then doing a regional geography is not a question of doing this artistic exercise as used to be. So I'm trying to really um, help you to make a distinction between what we have been talking until today, and then now this step towards this new, more concerned at regional geography with the issues of our time. And this involves, again, an understanding of all the human activities that take place in a defined geography. But again, sometimes this defined geography is defined through discourses, only through or also through interactions between people in the social context. So again, this again, and I go back to the work of the regional geography, which is fundamental here. Regions, they start being understood also as the within an evolutionary perspective. So how we can characterize them today. For example, how we can characterize Southern Europe exactly today, 10th of November 2021. It's certainly the result of an evolutionary process it's important to look how, for example, democracy evolved in these countries since the past to the present. Some of them, they were dictatorships, some not so far in time, some 40, 50 years ago. It's important to understand also these evolution processes, how they became integrated in supranational entities as well. So all of these components, they influence also the regional building process. And the geographers starting interested in assessing regional geography or conducting research within regional geography, they start becoming more concerned than before with this evolutionary process. And the reason of these pictures here below is this also involves, for example, innovation processes. Most of the countries within Europe, they evolve in different speeds in terms of integrating innovation in industry, for example, in supporting the evolution of industrial activities from more traditional activities or primarily focus on exploring natural resources, for example, to a more technological based industry. And currently, most of the discussions and the practice and also the funding that is coming from, for example, from the European Union, is to support a transition towards clean energy, supporting urban regions, for example, to decarbonize that we call decarbonizing the pipes or the heating system, for example, of within cities. So there's always an evolution, and this will continue probably to evolve towards more ecological ways of transportation, eventually completely reframing also of the working patterns, how we know those patterns today. And again, this certainly entails challenges. So, and for the regional geographer, he had to start embracing a number of other disciplines, not only geography, not only regional studies, but also political science, economic geography, political economy, to understand. So to understand how a region evolves, and to for a geographer to be able to define this regional geography, he or she are required to explore other domains within the within science, and look what is going on in other disciplines in the way that can justify this evolution. So some current strands of reason within regional geography, or the elements where regional geographers are currently paying specific attention. And again, this somehow repeats a little bit what I've been telling. They have been paying specifically or more closer attention to how these regionalities, these regionalization processes of social and everyday life, and I will tell you the reason of this picture here, influence the processes of regional building, and eventually the definition of a new region, abstract or well defined. And I refer the idea behind the using of this picture here is that sometimes the commuting patterns, for example, across borders, help to define a region, and then you can classify that region as a region where a number of workers develop their day-to-day life. So, and probably if we go back 10 years, nobody will ever be able to define such a region in this context. So a number of economic activities that start evolving in a day-to-day basis led to the appearance, the emergence of a new regional context. And sometimes this is only because a number of economic activities or related to trade or related to industry help to reshape this regional geography. And then others start to exploring more the if these even loosely defined regions, they entail or we can assign to them some sort of regional feeling. So some other geographers start going a step forward in that direction, trying to explore, for example, the concept of sense of belonging within these loosely defined regions, and to the point of contesting or criticizing the extent these some other regional identities can emerge within other regions, and then what then the relationship will be, and how people then will define themselves, or will try to what's the better word here, in this, if we do an assessment of asking them, so your feelings of belonging, do you belong to this specific region you work within, and you live across the border but you work in the other side, and so there is this industrial region here. Do you feel that you belong to that one, to that specific region, or you belong to the region from where you are coming from? So a lot of discussions is currently going on at this level, and this, again, that's what I point out here, involves also materiality. It involves an understanding of the infrastructures that exist in that context, so a number of material domains, physical elements that help to reshape some of these loosely defined territories. And in a sort of summary, the region starts becoming a set of social interactions. So more than having a government or a governance arrangements defining a region, what is now defining regions is the social interactions, and I will put the economic interactions, the social, the cultural, and economic interactions. And then we have to start understanding these regions as the result of this interaction of all of these processes, to the point that some of the more, I would say, institutionalized, political oriented process of regional building start to being minimized in favor of an understanding of the region as a space of social, cultural, and economic interaction. So these start to become the pillars of regional building processes, and a lot of this happens in Europe, happens a lot also in the southern part of Europe, where regions across borders start to emerge as the result of these social, cultural, and economic interactions. I think the two references I shared with you earlier this week, or at the end of last week, now cannot remember exactly, from Passy and John Harris, and they underline these aspects. So, and this concept again of sense of belonging, boundedness, and the sense of community that exists within the region, they start again playing a fundamental role in regional geography and in research conducted within regional geography. And as a conclusion here, so we entered a little more a more practical oriented part of the lecture, to see if we can grasp this a little better. And I must apologize that today I'm not in my best capacity, and at some point I may lose track here of the right words to express myself, or to translate in better words what the slides are showing to you. So if at some point I'm feeling a bit confused that's in my words, please interrupt me, and then I will try to explain better. So then the regional geography is emerged first as a sub area of academic geography within human geography, and start being theorized by different fields of research, or geographers more concerned with regional aspects start also fueling their research within other disciplines. And the major turning point here was the 80s, the beginning of the 80s. And then we enter this new regional geography, where these new regional geographers start becoming more concerned, and therefore start theorizing and coming with different kind of concepts, where they merge evolutionary aspects of regional building. They start becoming more concerned about the importance of understanding history and the social conditions that are contingent means that they are place-based, means the geographical context truly impacts also how the society behaviors in this specific geographical domain. Then the concepts or approach such as context specific place-based policies start also being part of the lexicon of regional geographers. And also very important, and to me is also and a fundamental aspect of my research is understanding the power relations associated with these regional building processes. And we have to question often why certain regions exist in that specific context, or understanding why this number of economic activities are more powerful in these regions than in the others, and why some regions also behave better in economic terms, for example, than in comparison to others. And these elements of power relations and the public-private interests that exist and coexist in these regions are fundamental, and fundamental to be assessed for a truly understand of regional geography. And regions in all of this debate, theorization of regional geography, they become stronger as an entity of study, or as an object of study, because they entail a number of complexities that certainly are very attractive to research. They lead to a multidisciplinary, they require a lot of collaboration and cooperation, which is always very interesting for academics and policymakers as well. And to the point also that a number of policies, for example, in Europe, or founding the founding that exists to support the cohesion policy, for example, requires a strong cooperation between regions. So all these elements of understanding that a region exists because of a number of complex elements is a fundamental process in the reshaping regions as we know them today, as these bounded unities elements within the territory. On other domain, not everything is positive. We can also have, I mentioned in the beginning that the elements of our media, communication, and education, they also influence the discourses or the narratives that lead to the development or the creation, the process of making one region even loosely defined, but they can also accelerate, for example, movements of resistance towards that new region that is coming. So a number of people, communities, then they organize themselves to somehow contest what contest the evolution towards a new regionality, or because they don't feel attached to it, or because they attach to it too much influence from private sector, for example. And there are a few cases in Europe, eventually more in other parts of the world. And all of this is part of this dynamics of dynamics within a regional geography. And even more complex these days is understanding all of this process of regional buildings. If we look at Europe, this globalization of the economy and of the culture happens all around the world. Even in Europe, if we can clearly define the territories that compose Europe and Southern Europe as well. But understanding now the sub regions, or these loosely defined regions within Southern Europe as the result of economic activity is even more complex if we put all of these pieces together in the context of globalized economy, of digitization as well, accelerated processes of urbanization, migration patterns, and the disruptions as well that often occur within our society, being these related to healthy issues or instability of the markets, for example. Then all of this also influences configurations and reconfigurations of the regional space. So that's the essence here, and hopefully I'm conveying the message that is clear to you, and then you can take a couple of words back with you to help your studies further on. One element here that could be that could lead to the composition, for example, of a model within regional geography is the loosely defined the concept of mega regions. Just sorry about this. So it's the concept of mega regions, and I particularly like this mega region, although it's also a very contested definition. So we have a number of mega regions. They exist mainly because of their economic power, and there's an economic geographer well known, Richard Florida, in Canada, that is some of the founding father of this concept of mega regions. Is the combination of metropolitan areas, of urban regions, if you will, that share a number of economic indicators that make them being able to be positioned internationally as large territories with a capacity to drive innovation, to drive economic policies, and even alter patterns of trade globally. Examples of those, and then this is something that I'm also open, for example, in terms of your mini essay, to read a little more about these mega regions, and although not within Europe, I share with you that I'm open to other regional geographies within this take-home mini essay. One of these mega regions that is it is underlined by Richard Florida is the region between, or this triangle between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. And what's the essence? For me, more important than that sharing with you that, for example, nearly 50 million people live in this mega region. What is more important also within regional geography is making this cross-case comparison. And I will be underlining this maybe too many times today. And the idea is precisely for you to go back home later today, and if someone again asks you, so what have you learned today in regional geography, you can simply tell, well, we have a specific regional issue, we may have a mega region, and they have all these very high hand indicators. A lot of people are living there, they are very dynamic, but you know what, they are so big that they equal or they are bigger, for example, that economies in the United Kingdom and Brazil. So making this comparison helps immediately the reader, and eventually at some point later on in your career, you will have people reading your work or assessing the material you are writing or you are developing in practice. It depends of the path you intend to follow. Is always important to grasp, to have some sort of comparison. You remember, probably you have read this in human geography studies, the football fields, when we are talking about a territorial area in planning, for example, in physical planning in our cities. It's always important to have some sort of measure here to do this comparison. So this mega region, the world's largest, Boston, Washington, the economic power of this mega region is bigger than the United Kingdom, than Brazil. So also helps you to have this idea. The world's second largest, and I'm here not, I haven't done a primary research to come with a ultimate data on these elements. I'm using the source that you can access also there in the Richard Florida latest work. Is this triangle between Paris, Amsterdam, and Munich, and a number of urban regions, Brussels, Cologne, Luxembourg, Stuttgart, also Frankfurt, that coexist in what we can define as this mega region, Paris, Munich, and in terms of economic output, more than, again, sharing all of these more specific details, economic output as much as Mexico does, and more than Italy, for example. So you see that the the economic capacity of these urban regions, that we define urban regions in terms of in urban geography, we define Paris as an urban region, Brussels as an urban region, because they act in interconnection or in a network with other small towns in the surrounding area. And sometimes these small towns are essential because they host high-end economic activities that sustain these high value economic indicators. So again, this is a loosely defined mega region. You don't have any protocol, any agreement between the countries like we have in the 16th century between Portugal and Spain, that this agreement between the kings defined the border. So there is no such a thing in this context. Is the economic activity, is the mobility patterns, the commuting between Belgium and the Netherlands, between Belgium and Luxembourg, between Germany and France, that define this mega region. So, and again, highlighting here that doing regional geography, or understanding regional geography needs, we have to embrace first a critical point of view, and to me, and based on my experience and in everything I've been reading, there is no regional geography without a critical geography. We have to be critical towards what we see in charts, in maps, or what we are reading in textbooks, for example. So understanding the functionality of these mega regions, the players, and eventually how they contribute to uneven economic development in Europe is also fundamental part of economic geography. And everything related to this is essential, very political, because as you may understand, public and private actors play a role in bringing this loosely defined and mega region to life, and certainly a number of political agreements, sometimes not on paper, also contribute to reshaping this mega region. Okay, and then I think we'll do a break in a couple of minutes. And do you have some questions at this stage? I'm having the feeling that I was not that clear in the initial slide, so please feel free to use the next 5 minutes if you have some questions, because then we'll do a break here, and I will enter the part on the Southern Europe again with a number of slides on economic aspects, demographic aspects that can help us to grasp or start grasping, and you may say finally the southern part of Europe. So any question from you?
Yes, I'm wondering a little bit because it's out of scale regional geography. So also how small can we look in regional geography? Is it so that we can we can look at places, and that's also regional geography, like very micro scale within a region, or is that the region itself then, or how do we understand that then?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's really an interesting question. Thank you for bringing it. Yeah, that I will share with you my view on this regarding. I will say yes, we can do. It's still regional geography if we go to the micro scale, but the caveat here, what is important to keep in mind is what I was just referring is having some sort of comparison to other contexts. Let me see if I can find an example. So you can look at a way some communities behave, and I'm telling communities, I'm referring to neighborhoods in cities. Let's think about coastal communities in Portugal, coastal communities in Portugal, so Southern Europe. They have a way of behaving, for example, towards fishing, towards the trade that is done with the fishing, and then how the fishing also helps the different families. So there is some kind of specific behavior within this community. Let's say you want to look at that, and that is a micro scale. We are looking at the community, how they behave, how the communities in the northern part of Lisbon behave. Okay, you start underlining these differences, this uniqueness. There is some sort of sense of attachment to that community, but can we actually then generalize this behavior to other communities in the rural part? Is this very traditional from coastal communities only? And then you went, okay, we have a pattern here, not necessarily indicators. This reduces the reduce these qualitative elements of the day-to-day life to a number. So more a patterns of this community, and you can start associating this behavior as part of a regional coastal community. So coastal communities they have this type of behavior, and we can integrate them, or we can have this loosely defined region where communities behave in this specific manner, which is slightly different than the way rural communities, for example, behave in the northern part of Spain. So having this kind of comparison, and then so we will have a mini. You will have a micro level scale here, but then if you are able then to understand how this compares to other communities in other regions, to me that is doing regional geography. That's why I some of you already came to me with a very short email with one or another idea about this take-home essay, and I'm all in favor even if you look at communities, but I ask to try to understand how, if this happens only in Europe, for example, of is an idea, let's say urban gardening in specific communities, an idea that emerged from Europe or comes from other regions of the world, maybe comes from a specific region in Canada or in Latin America. So if we can grasp a little bit how this way of doing things, gardening, agriculture exists in this specific geography, from where they are coming from, they still exist in these specific locations, how they are characterized here and there. To me, that is still doing regional geography, and probably I'm here learning a lot from Humboldt and these pioneers of regional geography, where that they tend always to characterize one geography in comparison to others in other contexts. Does this clarify?
Yes, thanks a lot. That makes it more handleable, kind of. And yeah.
Other colleagues, I mean, my colleagues, they may make comment differently, or for them maybe regional geography is really about a specific region. NUTS level 2 means the unities of statistic units, well defined with administrative boundaries. I tend to understand, and because of John Harrison, Hansi Pasi, so those are the researchers influencing me, then I tend to look at them in this loosely perspective, and then we certainly can assess and try to understand the evolution of regional processes within loosely defined regions.
Yes, of course, we can't make up our own names for the regions. That would be kind of strange.
That for that to happen, and sometimes happens, that you need these strong narratives, and then you have to understand who is behind these narratives of regional building, coming with the name of a region, and then is this more a place branding, this creating brands for places thing, part of a marketing campaign, or what it is part of any nationalist movement, for example. So it's important to disentangle all the processes that can occur.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think we can do here a 10 minutes break, and I will see you after. All right. All right, I think we can now resume our lecture, and the important aspect here in this in preparing this regional geography lectures is that again there is no single book that tells you regional geography of Southern Europe is this and that, or the differences are more related on this economic dimension, and the uniquenesses are related with the way they behave culturally, for example. So all the slides here and the forthcoming ones are the result of the compilation of different articles and book chapters in different books. That makes this preparation of regional geography also challenging, and also the teaching more challenging in this regarding. But hopefully you find it exciting learning these details. Another aspect here that is important to underline, that's regarding with the question earlier on the comparative cases, is important that you have some sort of uh, of equality in these assessments. The meaning here, if you are comparing communities in a specific region, in a specific country, eventually we'll find patterns of similar behavior in different domains, or they are characterized by a specific because they produce a specific agricultural crop, for example, or for example chestnuts, or they are linked with the production of the same type of fruit or same type of wine. Then you need to compare this with communities that somehow have a similar dimension in terms of scale. That is more challenging if you do not have a similar measure here to make this comparison. Of course, you cannot compare communities with the industry. That's clearly, we already know that from other studies. So it's important also not to have a dramatic difference in terms of the cases you are selecting. I'm in favor of these comparisons, even if the subjects are slightly different. Not all the communities behave in the same way. That's how that's why then regional geography is rich in terms of studies, is enhancing these differences and again these uniquenesses. But it's important to have some sort of a similar scale here for comparison. Communities in this specific territory with communities in another territory, uh, rural community with rural communities with urban communities. That is a clash starts becoming a bit stronger and more contested. For example, if you are writing an academic paper and want to publish it, you will have the reviewers contesting very much your work in this regard. So some heads up here that is important to underline. And part of these challenges of preparing the lecture, so I went through my archives, and also have done some new search to come with some paper that could help me to understand, okay, how these researchers, regional geographers, have been doing regional geography in Southern Europe. This one is very old, almost 40 years, and points out only the way a number of researchers, geographers, and others were doing regional geography of Southern Europe back in the days. So, and the author points out, and these are quotations, that the French start producing comprehensive regional maps, while the Spanish start devoting more attention to the publication of national maps. So while the French were more concerned with characterizing their regions, and probably uh, uh, this very much reflects what we know as French, with strong departments, strong regions, and they call their regions departments, while the Spanish call communities or provinces. And all these they behave differently in also the way they characterize their own regional geography. And then this is difficult to find there's some kind of methodology used to describe or to do a regional geography. Very much depends again of this background. The way I will do my regional geography of northern Portugal, it will certainly be different than the one if one of you go back there and tries to understand that regional geography. Will certainly describe it. Will certainly find issues that I'm not capable of finding because maybe I have some sort of feelings that make me less capable of being objective on my assessment. So this is important to understand also that what we are reading very much results on everyone's work in that specific context. Some books have been published and they try to disentangle this Southern Europe in different aspects. Some of them, they focus more on the people, on the social component itself. Others start describing the social component in relation to a physical element, to the Mediterranean, for example, and others start to describing this regional geography of Southern Europe more in terms of cultural patterns, for example. Again, different, all of them are placed within this broad domain of regional geography of Southern Europe, but then the way that this is done inside, the methodologies used is certainly different, which makes, again, the discipline rich in my opinion. And again, also extracts from that paper to underline here that some of these, the description, some of these works within regional geography of Southern Europe, some of them, they highlight the values of the physical environment, the natural landscape, for example, the distinctive elements of this landscape, how the population is distributed within that landscape. They try to understand land use patterns, settlement processes, the development of urban areas, for example. While other geographers pay more attention to the lifestyles that coexist in that specific territory, and all of these studies that resulted in different outputs, some in the form of maps, some in the form of more descriptive pieces, and we can then we can take this as a starting point of a more defined regional geography of Southern Europe. And some of these studies even then influenced also the way the European Union start developing its regional policy, targeting specifically parts of Europe. So let's see now if we can really start underlining these differences and uniquenesses again based on the data I was able to find. Maybe if I do or redo these slides later this afternoon, I will be able to find different type of data, or eventually if you do some similar exercise later on, you will certainly find or come across of different data. And we have different sources, different resources at hand, and all of these resources you will see now that they characterize differently Southern Europe. There are similarities indeed, but there are also some difference. We have the World Atlas that places these territories within Southern Europe. Gibraltar, countries well defined, they place Turkey within within Southern Europe, San Marino and Vatican as well. So as independent administrative unities, administrative/territorial units. So and while there are a number of geographers that their work is about criticizing these assessments and these aggregations, so then I'm going behind this that critic to bring more the difference and the uniquenesses in terms of elements of the day-to-day life. So we are talking about mainly three peninsulas within Southern Europe: the Iberian Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, and the Balkan Peninsula, as defined by the World Atlas. And all of these have also some contested borders, political clashes in between as well. The World Factbook even divides the southern part of Europe also differently, considering the southwest. And again, you can argue, well, we are talking more about the geographical position here, and not necessarily a, a region with specific characteristics in terms of or social terms, in cultural terms, of demographical terms. So it's very much about the geographical position, the definition they provide to us as Southern Europe only being the Italian Peninsula and Greece, and the Southwest Europe, the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain here. Another source places then Southern Europe only as the countries I intend to focus primarily later on: Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece. So again, a number of varieties, very much close the United Nations scheme, but including here also the Balkans, for example, Croatian, which is important for understanding the cross-border relationships with Italy, for example. So it's a part in the important definition in this context. Why this type of slides? Again, to illustrate that when we are doing regional geography, what we see requires us to stop, to reflect, and to try to understand methodologies as well, how they came to consider this assessment. Is this more a political organization? Is this purely geographical, north, south, east, and west? So it's important to do this entanglement, this going to doing an in-depth understanding how this comes to be. Okay, something we are probably more familiar, and here we start seeing some evenness across Europe. We have a region of where the economic behavior, the number of economic policies, they define this region, the region of the single market, and we have a number of elements here that unite unite within their respective differences in terms of economic behavior, the southern part with the rest of Europe, and also highlighting here that some of these other countries within southern part of Europe, they are not within this other region of the single market, yet there are a number of possibilities, in this case agreements, that are put in place to favor this regional building process, with with the ultimate goal of extending or enlarging and continuing enlarging and making the European bloc stronger. Again, this is also contested by political geographers, for example, in different domains. So also aspects to take into consideration. And more complex is to if we want to understand, for example, trade relationships involving the southern part of Europe, they are certainly less complex if we involve countries that are not part of the European Union, but they are placed or they are within a number of agreements that facilitate some type of relationship, and others are placed at intersection of agreements. So when we are, for example, describing our for example, exportation indicators, balance of payments, general economic indicators, is important to understand the type of agreements that exist between the countries. If they are embedded in some kind of supranational institution that determines the way they can perform economically. And then it is also important to assess the rule of law, which has been in the news quite extensively the last days. So if we look, okay, there is some uniqueness here in understanding the way they behave. If we look at their integration within the Council of Europe, but then we have to go more into detail. Okay, their performance in terms of economic indicators can also be justified because they are within the Eurozone, then they have to respect a number of policies from the European Union, and there's the Customs Union, and indeed a number of other countries with other type of governance arrangements of structures are also placed, and we have a number also others that do not engage with the so more traditional European Union or the pioneers of the European Union, they engage with forthcoming members or members that are still in an assessment stage, for example. So it's important to try to disentangle all these elements. But certainly a fundamental aspect, while to understand the regional geography of Southern Europe, and we cannot neglect, and we have 2 lectures on the role of the European Union in Southern Europe, is certainly what comes from the European Union as a supranational entity per se, and also the components that compose the European economic area. So they are Portugal, Spain, Greece, and Italy within the European economic area, and this brings to them some uniquenesses within their respective differences. And then let's see if we can start grasping a little more these differences here. And what I want to tell by bringing this slide here, okay, we see, okay, they are within the European economic area. The things could be understood as behaving in a similar manner. However, then if we go more, if we explore more at the country level within the Southern Europe, and the results from 2016, again, it is very important to pay attention to the sources and the data, the date of the respective source. They show some skepticism towards the European economic policy, for example, mainly Greece, Italy, and Spain. So they are within economic area, they share economical principles, guidelines, frameworks, policies, and they have to respect a number of rules. Yet they disapprove part of the of the European Union economic policy. And okay, then what if you ask me? Okay, so me as a geographer, or as a geographer interested in regional geography, how should I interpret this percentage, these reactions? Then of course you have to try to go more, do an in-depth exercise on understanding what leads to this position of the Greek, for example. Is this because this is some spontaneous reaction to the economic crisis earlier on? Is this a sentiment that remains at the present? So it's important to have other comparison in terms of through a time span here, or and then try to understand elements of destabilization elements, or a economic crisis, or other type of reactions. Maybe they are unhappy with how the cohesion policy funds have been distributed across the country. So it's important to understand the reasons behind this dissatisfaction towards the European Union economic policy. And as a matter of fact, here trying to explain, I tried to do some search on this regarding, and there is some differences in terms of the date of this study. So I came across of this study for one or many cohesion policy in the European Union. That's what Riccardo Crescendi and Maria Gia are asking. And they tried to make a comparison how countries across Europe have been benefiting from the cohesion policy, one of the pillars of the regional policy within the European Union. So they underline, and it also these are also quotations from the study. They underline that a large part of the regional growth bonus generated by the cohesion policy is concentrated in Germany. So we can argue that in overall Germany benefited substantially from the cohesion policy. And then Southern Europe, the indicators in Southern Europe in terms of the application or the benefits of the cohesion policy are less healthy, they point out, and the positive impact in terms of unemployment in Italy. But then came the recession, economic recession in 2017. 2017-20, there is a mistake here, then I have to correct, 2007, 2008, and then the economic growth in the recovery period in Spain. So they partly benefit of it, but in comparison to other European countries, they benefit less from the cohesion policy. And it's still, I have to then update the slides to make the correction on the date, on this date, and still they go along with that characterization and telling that mostly, even if the regions benefit of the cohesion policy in terms of regional employment, for example, they are still lagging behind, and seriously lagging behind regions in the southern part of Europe. And to underline this uneven development or uneven distribution, or uneven success of the cohesion policy found within Southern Europe. And one of the most areas that is still revealing a weaker performance is the southern part of Italy in Southern Europe. And they also point out that until this recession, then the cohesion policy was really supporting Southern Europe, mainly in terms of employment. And after the crisis, then they really suffer a higher impact of this great recession. Here the date is corrected. So it's also, when we analyze this evolution of the indicators in Southern Europe or others, it's important to understand these moments of crisis or political instability, for example, often also influences the way regions perform in one specific time or in one specific time frame. And then again, understanding what kind of main policies were in place to support them to overcome those elements. And here, in terms of is also interesting to understand, and the only data for Italy and Spain, how they've been investing or applying the cohesion policy funds, for example. And while Germany, that's a large percentage in terms of business support. This still is very weak in Spain, for example, in terms of research and technology. Still back during this period, 2006, rather weak in Spain, for example. So different speeds in terms of the application of the cohesion funds within the European Union. And most interesting that despite this strong package of cohesion policy and the financial mechanism that exist within the cohesion policy, a number of regions, as the reported in one of the latest European Commission reports, still lagging behind in terms of economic growth. And one of the notes I have here is that, okay, we are talking about economic growth, and I tend to say that certainly economic growth is important. Everybody needs to have a job to sustain themselves and sustain their families, and therefore then support the economic development of the country. But then is also important to understand other elements, the educational background, how the educational system works, how also the political system behaves in terms of the relationship with the European Union, and how they also adjust to the European Union founding schemes, for example. So we have within Southern Europe, and this is to underline here a differences in terms of other parts of Europe, is that the low income regions or low growth regions, and the definitions are here in both colors, dominate the southern part of Europe. So Portugal, many of the regions except the greater area of Lisbon, parts of southern Spain, mainly coastal areas of the Mediterranean, again the Mezzogiorno in Italy, the southern part of Italy, and Greece are these low growth regions. They still lagging behind in terms of economic performance when compared to Germany, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, the central bloc of the European Union. Yet they host almost or approximately 83 million inhabitants. So a really strong and large region in this context. And we can again classify this as the region of the low income territories within the European Union. So they form a block of low growth regions. And a lot has been done to help them to overcome these regions. And again, an exercise to do within regional geography. All right, we have the low income regions, how they are characterized in terms of settlements. They are characterized by small and medium-sized towns, even very small towns. But even that, there are some differences. There are considerable some difference actually. If we look at the southern part of Spain here, oh, the time is really running fast. The southern part of Spain here, and we have some kind of high density urban areas, and these are certainly characterized by the as being a tourism destination with a number of large scale hotels and resorts as well, in comparison to, for example, to more small and medium-sized towns of the also still low growth region of the coastal area of Portugal, also with the southern part of Italy and Greece, characterized by very small towns. This is also the physical territory, the physical geography certainly also impacts this this organization of the territory. Interesting to me is that, all right, this is not that bad. These are very small towns. We have process of slow innovation, for example, in some of these very small towns, indeed. And if we look at the Central Europe, we have Germany here, okay, very dense areas in the Netherlands and Belgium, and we also have other settlements here. So France regional geographies, as you can see, slightly different than the other parts of Central Europe. There are still very small towns, yet they are not lagging behind regions. Then you have to disentangle, okay, this really the organization of the territory, of the settlements, of the communities is not impacting their economic performance. Then you have to move forward with the set of indicators you bring to understand, to do your regional geography study. And then you start exploring what you have at hand in terms of statistics. And here it's only a number of maps that bring together a number of these statistics, not necessarily all in the same data. I was not able then to bring them the sources here. There are a number of explanations. And some of them, they present to me what are dramatic numbers of, for example, population at risk of poverty in 2012 in these lagging regions of southern Spain and southern Italy are, to me, considerably dramatic. Hopefully, now we are in 2021, the situation has improved a little bit, and then I really look forward to read some new report from the Commission on this regarding. And these lagging behind regions I pointed out, they still benefit largely from the structural funds, the funds that are specifically created to support regional development across the European Union. They are still benefiting from these funds, or they were benefiting within the previous multi-annual financial package from the European Union. Now we have entered a new period of financial mechanisms, and then we know that the Green Deal is the one that is somehow determining the distribution of funds across Europe. Still, the European Union Cohesion Fund, it still remains in place to support these less developed regions. And then this is another important aspect. In some of the reports, these regions are classified as low growth regions, which some geographers criticize this branding, because already places them as being less developed, weak, performing weak economically and in terms of productivity. So then the discourse starts changing to less developed regions, or regions that are even catching up. You also, if you do a search, you also come across of these catching up regions that are trying to do their best to catch up with the rest of Europe. And in terms of youth unemployment during the period 2014-2020, all of these lagging behind regions of Southern Europe, Portugal, and Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece, they could all benefit from the package made available to support youth employment. And the philosophy of the European Union, and a lot of researchers across Europe who often engage, and I'm familiar with some of them, often engage with European Union policy making, Philippe McCann and José Rodrigues Pose, for example, they argue that these lagging regions, although they are lagging behind in terms of economic indicators, and these small and medium-sized towns, they still matter to secure a cohesive regional development pattern. Okay, we have these somehow negative, partly dramatic indicators in Southern Europe, but indeed they matter to support this cohesive development of the overall European Union, and they have been arguing and proposing a number of policy recommendations to try to help these lagging behind regions to overcome their current situation and place them in the development path that can be more sustainable socially, economically, and certainly ecologically, as the discourse within the European Union is moving towards. What happened in these lagging behind regions? There are also a number of studies that underline that because of these because they're still lagging behind, or in terms of employment availability, for example, in terms of innovation capacity, people tend to become unhappy with these policies, and this can lead to the increase of populism and political radicalization. And there's a very good article here explaining these social processes within or as a reflex of unsuccessful political policies, for example, and the economic development schemes. And all of this contributes to the growing of regional inequalities across the European Union, and it is still part of the agenda for the forthcoming package. So, and then a number of researchers here, they start stressing again, they still matter. It's important to place them again on track, to find ways of exploring how they can become more prosperous in terms of the economic performance. And they start pointing out that the ways to develop more strategic, more tailored to the context policies that enhance the local resources and the local values. They start they tailor-made the policies that are capable of enhancing regional qualities as well, as some of these researchers point out in this direction, underlining also both the tangible and intangible capacities or amenities, as they call it, as being fundamental to bring back these regions to the level of economic growth of the rest of Europe. And I underline that not everything is about economic growth. It's important also to understand that they have other amenities, other features, tangible and intangible, that is important to understand. There are a number of unique elements, characteristic from Portugal, from Spain, Italy, and Greece that that do not exist in other parts of Europe, as is important indeed to find ways through policies or through informal arrangements to highlight them and eventually take advantage of them, not in sake of the European Union indicators. Hopefully don't understand me wrong, not necessarily in favor of the European indicators, but in favor of the communities living there that can truly benefit them in terms of employment and in terms of future prospects, which I critically and I argue on this, for example, regarding Northern Portugal and Galicia. It's important to have these tailor-made context-specific policies. This is very dear to the European Union policies, but policies that are capable to really bring new prospects, better prospects to the communities living in the southern part of Europe. But not everything is negative. Southern Europe has been really developing certainly all their regional potentials, investing in their regional qualities, not making any distinction between countries here, and they have been progressing towards the here. And in this regarding, what I underline here is that it's not only me that decides to highlight as part of Southern Europe only Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Greece. So a number of sources, they also tend to do that. So that's why I also decided to then focus on these four countries within Europe. So they've been evolving with the resources they have at hand, and there are some variations in terms of employment and other statistics. They still presenting lower employment in Europe when compared to other regions within Europe. And again, the packages that are coming within the new multi-annual financial framework of the European Union are still in place to address unemployment in Southern Europe, particularly the youth unemployment, which is still very high in comparison to other regions of Europe. And the things are getting better. That's what the economist is telling, and the economist again also focus on these countries in southern Europe. In terms of employment, the indicators are showing a better performance, but still a lot to do in this regarding. And certainly here the data is for 2019, and then we have to place now COVID crisis and the impact COVID crisis had on the unemployment as well. And the productivity is the things have been improving as well. The productivity in Southern Europe many times contested by more central countries, Central European countries. A performance lower than the northern part of Europe and the western part, and they are somewhat stable since 2005 in terms of the productivity in comparison to others. And some countries, they have been performing better than others in terms of in the Southern Europe. Surprisingly, Portugal has been performing interestingly well in terms of the productivity. That's been evolving quite significantly since 1995, which reveals is an interesting element to take into account. Still far from the levels of more advanced countries such as Germany or Spain in France. And the OECD also brings the United States for a comparison in terms of productivity involving different countries. Of course, the size of the United States, that economic capacities is considerably different if we place it in comparison to Portugal, for example. And then we probably will need to compare the United States as a region with the entire European Union and not with the countries per se. So you can definitely contest this graph here. In terms of investments in IT, some positive aspects across the country, some evolution towards the current times. This is only results until 2014. Certainly, more recent data will show a continued evolution of these elements. In terms of this is access to the internet, if I'm right. So Southern Europe still perform relatively well in comparison to other countries, but then we have Asia dominating here in terms of this indicator. And households with broadband connection, we have some lagging regions in southern part of Europe, mainly in Greece and also the southern part of Italy. In terms of exports, since the crisis, a little bit 1 year more or less after the crisis, 2007, 2008, there has been an evolution in terms of exports in the southern part of Europe. It's still lagging behind in comparison to other regions. And what I write here is important to measure this indicator of exports, and the Central Eastern Europe, for example, Poland, Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia. They are performing well, where they have a high percentage of exports, and it's important to to understand the labor costs, for example, and the impact of, again, globalization and the trade policies in this in revealing the truth of these indicators. In terms of regional competitiveness, very far, and the colors reveal these differences between the central bloc and the southern part of Europe in terms of regional competitiveness. Still a lot to do for them to catch up with the central bloc of the European Union. And I have the time is up. Then I have a number of more demographic indicators and also related with tourism towards the end of the lecture, and I will bring them to the beginning of our lecture next week. And because the time is up and I have to run to catch up with another module just afterwards. So my apologies if at some point I was not able to be as clear as possible and not giving too much space for the debates. I can still stay here for more 10 minutes if you have questions. And you know that you can always come to me via email or use the group for that effect. But feel free to bring some questions at this stage if you have.
I have a question, or
yes,
maybe something to add. I don't know if that's a question. Just wanted to ask you on your view on the new Open Balkan initiative between Albania, Serbia, and Macedonia. Mainly Kosovo, we still don't know about, or it's a bit complicated with Kosovo, but what do you think of that? Or can we see that? I mean, it's probably going to start in 2023, but can we also see that as one of these regions that are important to look at in the Southern Europe?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with exactly how this will be organized. I can explore, and I will explore, and I will certainly come to it later on. And this certainly can be seen as a new regionality that will emerge with specific goals, and can also be taken as a starting point for a stronger bloc in that context. And then it's important to understand the goals of that regionality that is emerging there. Is this only economic? Is to aim to achieve a wider European integration? How they position themselves also in this geopolitical context? I'm not exactly familiar with how this is evolving at the moment, but I will certainly explore, and I think it sounds very relevant in terms of regional geography of Southern Europe, exploring how this new Balkan bloc is emerging. And the direction that it will take. What's the direction they intend to evolve
Thank you. I just think it's very interesting because even if in the question of Kosovo, because regionalities, it also has to do with political geography and how these regionalities are constructed, and how deals are basically done with the different countries. But I don't know if that's an aspect we're going to look at throughout the lectures.
You will. We can look at it. I will make space for it because I think it's important. And the question or a critic we can put here as sometimes these tentatives of creating these regionalities, these abstract regions are done without consulting the population, for example, and then they emerge as contesting this regionality or this abstract region, and they sometimes can accelerate conflict, for example. And this is certainly very interesting to explore. Will probably be subject of a lecture within critical more critical geography, political geography, perhaps. But then I will make a note, and when probably when we reach the governance is coming up next week, I could devote some time to that and explore it a bit more in detail, more than bringing this data into the slides. But the contestation is really interesting to explore within regional geography, and there is still a lot of gaps within regional geography research in this regarding.
Thanks a lot. It's a very interesting topic.
Well, welcome, and once again, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching this at home, and again, my apologies if this is not going the direction you intended to, and I'm really doing my best. And certainly, the next lectures I will try to really do even better to satisfy you, and then bring you some serious knowledge to your courses. All right, so see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.